So obviously it's great for you folks to see. Now this is going to be a great object lesson in that we may pop the raft open and it will do its thing and open up. Typically we want these things to open up in less than 30 seconds. The SOLAS requirements are that they're boardable in 30 seconds, so it's got to have enough CO2 volume in it to open the raft. All right. However, this one, the last time it was actually up for inspection was 10 years ago. So we'll see what happens when we open it up, all right? The lifespan of these things is typically no more than 10 or 15 years from the manufacturer. Every manufacturer has their own cutoff date on when they'll reinsert a raft, okay? Because they're made of rubber, and they're really only designed to do one thing once, which is save your life if the boat goes down and inflate properly. This is a non-SOLAS raft, okay? It's a typical, what we call a yacht raft. So the amount of gear in it is actually minimal to its needs. It's probably a coastwise raft, and we'll see what's inside of it. And other than that, we'll see what happens. Typically, the amount of painter on a raft is what? Anybody know off the top of the head? Typically 100 feet, okay? Now, depends on what kind of vessel it's on. If it's on a container ship, you know, or a car carrier, and the car carrier's deck is 80 feet off the water, it's going to have more painter line in it. It's going to have 120, 130 feet. But typically they're manufactured with 100 feet. So if the vessel does go down underneath the raft and it sinks, if you're in the Chesapeake Bay and it's only 40 feet of water, the vessel's going to go to the bottom and the raft's going to bob on the surface and never open. However, it's still going to be attached to the vessel, so you can swim over to the raft and pop it open. Now there's one thing that is important, and if it does inflate, I want you to watch for this, because this is really important and nobody really talks about it, is that when the raft opens, there's normally more CO2 in there than needs to be. So where does all that CO2 go?
In the atmosphere?
It goes off pressure relief valves. And each tube has a pressure relief valve. The problem is that if it goes off in the water and you're floating in the water, or you have passengers or other crew and they're bobbing in the water with their head, they're very often right at the same level as these valves, okay? And they're desperate to get into that raft. You got to understand the mental state most people are in when this happens. So they'll gather right around that raft, and if their eyes are at the level where these PV valves are, it will freeze their eyeballs. Remember, when CO2 expands, what happens? You see it comes out very, very cold. So now you've got a medical injury on top of, you know, everybody's cold trying to get into the raft. So listen for that when the raft opens. It may or may not happen. Depending on the water temperature that the raft opens up in, if it's really, really warm and the bottle's warm, that gas is expanding pretty rapidly coming out. And it fills the raft and then blows out the PV valves, okay? And we'll see if that happens or not, all right? When this doesn't have the bands on it, which are normally right here. Those bands keep the raft under a certain pressure, and when the CO2 expands in the raft, it pops those valves. Now when that happens, these things have a tendency to open up like a clam, sometimes fairly violently, all right? Normally it's not too bad, they just sort of pop and they fold open, but we've had a case once or twice where I think they put too much CO2 in the bottle, and we popped it in the pool, and the top of this raft literally went about, what, 30 or 40 feet. So that's actually unusual, but it can happen. We shouldn't have that problem today, but just kind of be a little leery of it. It should be all right. Anybody want to pull this thing? Just keep walking away with it as you pull it out.
There you go.
See how it's unfolding? All right, hear the PV valve? One inside.
Oh, that's cool.
All right, you see how cold it is coming out. All right, this Avon raft actually has PV valves that are inside the raft. Now, what's the problem with the PV valves inside if you were to start crawling inside real quick? Gonna be knocked out.
This place was rock.
The inside of the raft is full of what? CO2 gas. Okay, not good.
Online, 11:30.
So the raft is in a position to board immediately. The door has been bound open, okay? You've got your light up top, reflective tape. You've got your visual snorkel tube for either looking out in really bad weather. You can open that up and stick your head out without filling the raft full of sea conditions if you're in a 10 or 12 foot sea, all right? You can also, you know, use that to signal with, put a flare out, okay? With that. Notice the line around the raft so that people can hold on to the raft before they get on board and turn themselves around, okay? We have our sea anchor, okay? This will usually automatically deploy and keep the raft from drifting too far away from everybody. The one thing about these rafts is that the minute they inflate, and if it's blowing even 10, 15 knots out, they will take off. And you, trust me, you cannot swim that fast and keep up with it. So if the raft canister is at the surface and you go to inflate it, all right, you got to make sure that there's enough people close enough to that thing to grab a hold of it once it's inflated and get at least one person inside. The strongest, most capable person has got to get in that raft first, so that then they can help other people that either may be injured or will just have a hard time, that, you know, mentally or having a tough time to get inside the raft. You can see there's also a heaving line in there. You notice that little rubber donut? Anybody know what that's called?
Rubber donut.
Quoit, okay, a little French word, all right. That's used to throw to people that may be adrift from the raft so you can get them back in. And then lashed down on the back side is our bag full of gear. Yeah, inside that bag will be all the gear. There's usually an inventory list in there.
Great, and that bag of gear is on top of the bottle as well, so all the weight's on that one side.
Yep. Now these wires that come down here, this is the system that automatically turns on the lights. There's a saltwater activated switch. Okay, so the minute this thing inflates, the switch down here gets impregnated with salt water and turns on the lights. Okay. All right. One of the notes that we made when we pulled this out is that the lines that were holding this bag down on the floor of the life raft, all right, were such that it would have been hard to undo those knots if you had an immersion suit on. So you would have had to have slipped the gloves off in order to take this off. So just another fact to be leery of. All right, so what do we got? First thing is a pump to reinflate the raft if it had a leak and or blow up the floor. Okay, one thing that does not automatically inflate on the raft when it does inflate is the floor. Most rafts have inflatable floors, and what does that provide for us when we inflate the floor?
Insulation.
Insulation.
Cushion too.
Major reason is insulation from the cold. Okay. Seasick pills. Okay. Seasick pills in the raft. One of the big things about being in a raft is your possibility of getting seasick is really high. Okay. They very, very much recommend that you take a seasick pill as soon as you get in a raft. But they say even people like me who don't have a tendency to get seasick, even in a life raft, you'll probably get seasick. Okay. All right, we got, what is this?
Baler.
Okay. No, it's not a hat. Okay. It's a baler, all right, for bailing out. One thing you do not want, once you get all those people inside the raft, there's going to be excessive salt water in the floor of the raft, and you want to get all of that out. The last thing you ever want is anybody to be sitting in salt water in the life raft for any length of time. Okay. Any of you read, probably none of you have read the report on the Pride of Baltimore 2, Pride of Baltimore 1 when she sank in '86, but they had 8 people in a 6-person raft. So that raft we just inflated was 6. But you can imagine 8 people stuffed in that raft for 3 days. And one of the things they suffered, because they were down in the Caribbean when this happened, they didn't have immersion suits on, they just had shorts on and t-shirts and things like that, is they got a lot of sores, skin sores, from the salt water and just rubbing against each other, all right? So that's one of the things that can happen. All right, this here, all right, contains a signal mirror for the Liferaft, okay? It's got a Coast Guard approval number on it. You guys wanna pass that around, you can. All right, here's the inspection logbook for this. Got what? Okay, these are disciplinary tools.
Borrow one, I need one, I got one student.
All
I
right,
can only use those at home.
here's the lighting panels.
That's what you pack special?
All right, we got a life raft kit, we got a first aid kit, and we've got a raft repair kit, okay? This is not for smelling, okay? All right, repair kit. What do we got there?
Water pack.
These are water packs, okay? This is all emergency water. What do we got here? All right, got a can opener in here. We've got 2 sponges. We can use the sponges. Usually there's at least 2 sponges. We can usually use 1 sponge for sopping up salt water, and then you use the other sponge for fresh water. Okay, for gathering up fresh water from the top of the raft or whatever. I forgot to show it to you. I think that raft had one, but there's a little funnel actually on the canopy roof of the life raft. So when it rains really hard, you can actually refill your emergency water packs. One of the things you do is when you cut those open at the top, you actually save them. And if it starts raining out or whatever, you can actually fill them back up. Okay, just plastic bags for stowing gear in. There's your inventory list right here in the raft, okay? The signaling procedures, we talked about rules of the road, these are your signaling. Last but not least, flashlight with extra batteries.
Coast Guard approved.
Okay? Coast Guard approved. All right, flares. I told you guys earlier about flares, okay? These are actually Payne Wessex flares, okay? Typically, these Payne Wessex flares are SOLAS approved and Coast Guard approved. All right, date of expiration 2006. All right, so that was past the expiration date for the life raft itself, which is pretty typical, okay? All right, so this thing was probably, that raft was probably inspected in '03 or went through a service probably in '03.
It's stamped on the case.
Yeah, okay. These are your rocket parachute flares, okay? Top and the bottom, okay? Typically there's a ring in here and you just put your finger in it and pull it to ignite it, okay? These ones here, pretty straightforward. All you do with these things is you pull them, you turn them, and you just slap the bottom of it, and that's what ignites it. Okay, very easy to operate. All of these things usually have directions on it right here, you know, on how to operate it. You don't even have to read English, okay? There's usually drawings right on it, okay? All right. So, pretty basic raft, but all the necessities inside this particular raft.